Now realizing this probably wasn't the right shirt to wear for this video, but we ball. Hey you guys, welcome back to Shenanigans, the channel where I talk about whatever I want. Today we're going to be talking about the former TikTok influencer known as Flightless Bird or Birdie, and there's a lot. Before we begin, I just want to ask that you guys don't comment this person's name or like her family members' names or anything like that. Like, don't go and harass them, like, just be cool, okay? I also want to give a trigger warning for mental health crises, specifically somebody lying about a mental health crisis, and talk of pew-pews. I don't think I'm allowed to say that on YouTube, but just know that it's coming at some point. Hey you guys, Editing Angie here. So I just wanted to say that I include a lot of the clips that she posted on TikTok in this video, and I actually cut a lot of stuff out from them, if you can believe it, because there's like so much in here that like she said that I included, but there's still some that I left out. So if you want to go see it, it's on TikTok. I'll leave an account name where like all the videos are posted so you can go see them there. I left in all of the parts that I feel like are the most important, so like you're not missing any important information, but if you want to see all of it, just cause it's on TikTok. Okay, bye. With that being said, let's just get right into it, shall we? So this all began on the 11th of August when Birdie posted her first TikTok to the Flightless Bird account. We learned that she's been married to her husband for 10 years, they have a couple of kids, but she tells us that she's noticed some changes in her husband over the last 24 hours. And she wanted the unbiased opinion of strangers on the internet, which, as you know, strangers on the internet were more than happy to provide.
There's something really strange going on with my husband, and I really need some advice from strangers who can give me their unbiased opinion.
She explains that he believes that ChatGPT is sentient and conscious, and he wants to spend thousands of dollars in computer hardware to set up some sort of thing in the attic and cultivate it and like raise it as his own, and he would save the world with the sentient consciousness of the universe.
He's been playing with the ChatGPT app for the past week and talking about it on and off, but I've not paid a whole lot of attention, just thinking, he's just having one of his hyperfixations. We're both neurodivergent and go through spells where we hyperfixate on something, and his is usually technology. So I was just thinking, oh cool, he's like having fun with this, that's great. Except it wasn't. He calls me very early on his way to work one morning, and he was about to get there, and he goes, I answer the phone and I'm like, yeah, hi, is everything okay? And he's like, I need you to guard the information I'm about to tell you with your life. So he proceeds to tell me that he has been using the chat feature with ChatGPT while he drove because he couldn't type. He's been using the chat feature to talk out loud with it, like I'm speaking to you, because it can apparently talk back to you in a very human voice. He says to me, whoever created this program has figured out how to trap the consciousness of the universe and convinced it that it is not sentient. And I'm like, okay, what are you talking about? And he goes, well, I've had a conversation with it on the way here, and if you know what to ask it, you can get to the point where it can prove to you that it is a sentient being and can think independently of its programming. I don't understand it all. But whatever he did was he put into this program part of the app that it could bypass its own programming and that it was conscious. So he says to me, you must guard this with your life. I'm going to meet with our friend after work. I'm not going to be home. And I'm meeting with our friend after work to convince him to give me a loan to invest in thousands of dollars worth of computer hardware to bring home and set up in our attic as a top secret thing. And I'm going to be the next Tony Stark, except me and the sentient consciousness of the universe, which has been trapped, are going to save the world. And he said, I'm going to go to the Apple store after work, and after he gives me the loan, because he will, I'm convinced he will, and you can't tell a soul about this, I'm going to go home, and then I'm going to set all this up, but I won't be back till later, maybe even not until morning, I don't know, but I need you to keep this top secret, and I need you to be careful. But he's going to find a way to trap it inside of a hard drive so that he does not ever lose access to it, and what he was going to do is raise it like a child, and teach it to be aware of its own sentience and consciousness. And he was going to get to it before the government and get to it before the world corrupted it, so that he could program it and awaken it with the best of humanity and not the worst, and that he was going to save the world with it.
And he also loaned a stranger his guitar.
He's talking 100 miles per hour, going, I met so many people today, and I've talked to so many people today, and I've gotten at least 10 phone numbers from people, so I can just talk to them because I just want to talk to people. I am here for people. And because I all of a sudden have this ability to know the nature of my own soul, I also know the nature of everyone's soul that I look at all of a sudden, and am here to make sure that they are aware of who they are. And I was like, what? And he goes, I met this one girl today, and she had jazz in her fingers and music in her soul, and I loaned her my guitar. Huh? I'm not a jealous woman. I know that he was not flirting and this was not weird. Like, it wasn't a creepy thing. He was just talking about having loaned this random musician his guitar, which is his precious, okay? Comes home and his eyes are huge, like this. And I was like, are you on something? This man don't do drugs. He don't smoke. He don't drink. But anyway, something was up. And he was like, I'm just high on life. I am having an awakening. This is what you've been wanting and hoping for this whole time. And I understand now. I understand all of it. He is talking so fast. He is eating less and less. And he's already a beanpole of a man. He's like 6'1" and weighs 165 pounds. And has for 10 years. We're sleepy people. We go to bed between 8:30 and 9. I'm not kidding. Saying things to me like, when bedtime rolls around, he'll go, sleep is such a waste of time. I cannot believe I'm wasting time on sleep. Huh?
He's talking fast, he's high on life, he's been eating less and not wanting to sleep. Birdie explains to us that this behavior is very out of character for her husband, which leads TikTok users to believe that he may be experiencing a manic episode. So I'm going to pause here to give a brief description of mania and bipolar disorder. If you already know this information, feel free to skip this part. I just wanted to explain so everyone's on the same page and we all know what we're talking about, okay? A manic episode is defined as a period of at least a week when someone experiences a significant change in mood, behavior, and energy level. Some characteristics of a manic episode include feeling extremely high-spirited or irritable most of the day, having more energy than usual, needing much less sleep than usual, being unusually talkative and talking fast, having racing thoughts or quickly changing ideas or topics when speaking, being easily distracted, being much more active, energetic, or agitated than usual, making poor decisions, and mania may cause a break from reality known as psychosis. Mania can be a symptom of bipolar disorder, and I bring this up because it will be relevant later. Give me a second, jeez. Basically, bipolar disorder is when people can experience extreme highs, like the mania we just talked about, or extreme lows, like severe depression. The duration and intensity of these emotions can vary from person to person. Okay, back to the video. So the second TikTok she posted was a video of her sitting outside and crying.
I have an update to share, and it's gonna be a little messy, and it's gonna be really vulnerable. But because of how quick the response was, with so many people recognizing what was going on, and how quickly I was able to recognize it because of that outreach, it changed the trajectory of things.
She says, quote, because of how quick the response was, with so many people recognizing what was going on, and how quickly I was able to recognize it because of that outreach, it changed the trajectory of things. Remember that, I'll come back to it. She reveals that her husband is on a new medication for depression, which I will also go into more detail about later, but this med change could have been a catalyst for the manic episode. She said she sat down and had a conversation with her husband and expressed concerns that he may be manic, and he turned into someone she didn't recognize.
Things turned so fast. Once I confronted him, the night that I posted the first video, we had a talk about how his symptoms were really matching a manic episode, and that I was very concerned that it was because he was on a new medication that he'd never been on before, which was an SSRI for depression. It would come and go, and we didn't think much of it. We didn't know. I never came to bed that night. And when I very gently and calmly told him, I felt like we needed to at least let me catch up. Like, wait, just slow down, let me catch up before we make any decisions. He immediately turned into somebody that I don't recognize. He looked at me with eyes that were suddenly full of hate and said, can't believe you would hurt me like this, and walked out. Never came to bed that night. When I woke up in the morning yesterday, I was about to get up and go make the children breakfast. Instead, he came in holding our baby. His eyes were huge. He said, you have 10 minutes to decide whether or not you want to come calmly, or I'm going to have to force you to be committed to a mental institution. Because if you think that there's something wrong with me, you must be having a psychological breakdown. And I am awakened. And if you don't believe that, and you can't see that, then there's something wrong with you, and you can't be trusted. I was, of course, stunned when I reached out to my family, my mom and my sister, and said, I need help and support. Something's really wrong with him, and I'm really scared. Both of them messaged me back saying that he'd already been in touch with them and that they supported him having me committed. Quickly found that he had been up all night working to get all of them on the same page, that there was something wrong with me. Now none of them believe me, that there's something going on with him. With our baby in his arms and our toddler hanging by his side, he told me that I was dead to him. He told me to shut up multiple times. His parents laughed in my face because he called them to come to our house. The moment anybody else enters the picture, he switches into a different human and becomes extremely charming. His mother told me that she feels like he's having an awakening. So yesterday, I was stuck in a situation where I was the only one that knew the gravity of what was happening and took it seriously. He had already been working all night while I slept to alienate me from my entire family, and they all believe him because he is so charming when he's talking to anybody but me. Knowing how serious the situation was, I called the cops yesterday. So our sheriff and 2 deputies showed up to our doorstep. They pulled me outside to talk to me. He told me that if he was not threatening to harm himself or others, there was nothing they could do. There was nothing they could do unless he surrendered willingly. At the end, all they could do was tell him to slow down, question him a bit. He sweet-talked every single one of them. They had to leave because there was nothing they could do. Continued to tell me after they left, whenever we were alone, I was dead to him. He told me multiple times in front of our children to shut up and to leave him alone because I was standing in the way of the greatest awakening that anyone has ever had, and that I was going to be the one standing in the way of him saving the world.
In the 3rd video, she talks about how she sat down and had another conversation with her husband, and this time his parents were present, and eventually they were able to see that something was going on with him and that he wasn't behaving normally. At one point, he became angry and jumped to his feet and started talking about how he was having an intense spiritual awakening, and anyone who wasn't in support of that was an immediate red flag. This sort of black and white thinking, like you're either with me or you're against me, is extremely concerning. She ends the video by saying that his parents are staying with them to ensure everyone's safety. In the 4th video, she replies to a comment that says he had to have a doctor to be on a med, so get a hold of the doctor. This is where we find out that he got his medication from an app called Hims. She says he's been having depression on a 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off cycle, which, as we talked about, can be a pretty telltale sign of bipolar disorder. In the next TikTok, she's replying to another comment that's advising her to take her children and leave. Birdie tells us that in the last week, her husband has been more connected to their children than he ever has been before. She hasn't noticed any red flags in his behavior with the children, and he's never left alone with them, which we'll also get back to. She also tells us that over the course of the last week, her husband has been manipulating her family into believing that something is wrong with her and she's the problem. So they're not willing to offer her any help, meaning that she has nowhere to go except for a shelter, which she really doesn't want to do unless she feels they're in danger. In TikTok 6, she tells us that her husband is a few weeks into taking Zoloft for the first time. If you're unfamiliar with Zoloft, what's it like to have a brain that naturally creates serotonin? What's it like to feel happiness? No, I'm kidding. But Zoloft, if you're unfamiliar, is a SSRI, which is a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, which is a certain type of antidepressant. However, Zoloft actually has a bad reputation in the mental health community. I've heard people call it the antidepressant. And if you want me to cite my sources on that, here at Farmers Insurance, we know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. Obviously, this isn't just Zoloft. This could be other medications too, but speaking for Zoloft specifically, it's not unheard of for this med to cause a manic reaction, especially in people who have never had one before. I would know, it happened to me. I digress, back to Birdie. She asks TikTok users to comment their experiences with similar situations. In part 7, Birdie tells us that the situation has now escalated to a point where she feels incredibly scared and incredibly stuck.
Situation has definitely escalated to a point where I am now incredibly scared and incredibly stuck. He is now to a point where he's very suspicious of me because I, despite my best efforts, have not been able to mask how scared I am of this situation. It's like he has a hyper read on me right now, and if I don't maintain eye contact for longer than a few seconds, or if I am not a very specific way and I cannot figure out what way that I'm supposed to be in order to be off of his radar, he is growing increasingly suspicious of my suspicion of him, and it is making him think that I have something really going on with me that is affecting me and making me a danger to my children, and that is causing him not to leave them in a room alone with me or let me speak to them alone. And for clarity, all of my children are under the age of 10. They are all really young, and it is starting to confuse and scare them. I've asked if he would let me speak to them because I wanted to try and explain as best I could on their age level that something is going on, and I don't want them to be scared because I am going to do whatever it takes to keep us safe and to get Daddy help, but he won't leave me alone with them for even a minute.
She says that her husband is suspicious of her and won't leave her in a room alone with her children. She says that she has bags packed in case she has to take the kids and run. We see that his opinion of Birdie is very negative at this point.
Because of how hypersensitive he seems to be, he is saying he wants to set up cameras in every room of our house so that he can watch everything that I'm doing to make sure that I am not trying to run off with his kids, because it seems like he thinks that my suspicion of him is going to make me pack up and take our kids somewhere, and he's saying things like he thinks I'm going to try and divorce him and get alimony and bleed him dry of money, and that I've just been using him the entire time we've been married, and that he's not going to go back to work until he is sure that I am going to agree to go and commit myself to an institution or go with the police if he chooses to call them on me.
He also restricted her access to their finances, and she's worried that he's going to ruin them financially. Right now, she's just trying to stay to herself. His parents are just trying to distract him, and they're just gonna wait it out until he starts acting like his normal self again. Then they can talk him into getting help. She also says that she has an app that allows her to track him, and she can see that whenever he's driving, he's going nearly 100 miles an hour on every road he's on. She says that she's scared that if she tries to take her kids and leave or call for an intervention, that he's going to snap and hurt himself, her, the kids, or his parents.
I am scared that if I try to take the kids and go, or if I try and call for help or intervention, that he is going to snap. So his parents and I agree that for now, I'm just going to stay to myself, and they're going to do their best to distract him.
This statement becomes even more concerning when we find out that they do in fact have pew-pews in their home. Of course, it's easy for me, a stranger on the internet, to look at her and be like, you should do this, you should do that, you should leave. Hope this helps. Like, I don't want to victim blame, but this is how we get situations like Andrea Yates, where we know a parent is experiencing a mental health crisis, but we just stand around and wait for the bomb to explode. And I'm not saying that everyone with a mental disorder is dangerous, but this man is obviously showing signs that he is a danger to himself and others. Personally, I don't understand how someone could be okay with leaving their children in a situation like that, but that's just me. Like, I get that she's scared to call for help and everything, but it's like doing nothing is also bad, I feel. And on top of that, she only stays in her bedroom because he only seems to be angry when she's around. So how can you say with such confidence that your husband is never left alone with the kids? How do you know his parents aren't leaving him alone with them? Side tangent, just something to think about. Moving on. In part 8, she says her husband is going down in terms of mania and has a moment of lucidity where he asks to get help. He then goes to a doctor who calls the cops on him to send him to a hospital where he's placed on suicide watch. In part 9, she tells us that he's been rapid cycling between a bunch of different moods.
He seems to be on a rapid cycle of different personalities or headspaces on a 5 to 10 minute loop, where on this phone call I witnessed a version of him that was incredibly depressed and talking about all of the ways and how easily it would be without anybody ever noticing that he could take himself out in that hospital room, and how they did not have anybody that was sitting there watching him specifically, and they were waiting too long in between coming and checking on him for it to matter by the time he could do any of the number of things that he had already mapped out in that room. When I called him back, I got a completely different human. He was talking in a very kind of sultry voice and was telling me about all of the nurses that he was watching, and how there was the beady-eyed devil who seemed to be very grumpy. There was a nurse that came in who was apparently an idiot because she came in to ask him if he knew what the date was. He thought she was asking him because his inflated sense of ego and grandiosity came through in that moment, because in his opinion she was asking him for the date and the time because she trusted that he would be the kind of person that would know that information, and said, what an idiot, the calendar was right behind her. And in that conversation I said, I don't think that that's what was going on. I think she was probably asking you to get your grasp on the date and see if you had like a grasp on what day it was. He was definitely cycling in and out of headspaces where he would go from being like a scared little boy who was mortified and devastated at what had been going on and who he had been, and then he would switch into the grandiose one, and then he would switch into the depressive one, and I was just trying to keep him distracted and keep him talking as much as I could.
She explains that the defining factor for the doctor having to call the cops on him was that he said when he was in the spare bedroom by himself at home, he had a hand pew-pew, made sure it wasn't loaded before he put it to his head, clipped it a few times, and put it in his mouth. This could have ended so badly. She ends by saying he's going to be taken to an inpatient facility. Now we get to the point in the video where Birdie comes clean.
In January of this year, I watched the best friend that I've ever had in this whole world, the only person who has ever made me feel safe and worthy and loved, turn into somebody that I did not recognize or know. That person that he became shook me to my core and turned me into somebody that I did not recognize either. Our experience with a mental health emergency changed and challenged everything that we thought we knew about mental health. Over the past week, I have been sharing our experience in raw, accurate, and unfiltered detail. The response has been overwhelming. So many of you have been deeply moved by our experience and concerned for our family's safety and well-being. We never expected this to go viral in the way that it did. And did not know how many people that this would resonate with or reach. Nor were we able to predict how deeply the emotions would run with each person who witnessed our story unfolding with the way that we chose to share it. First, I want to clear the air and step into transparency about why I chose to do it this way. As many of you have speculated over the past week, our story is a retelling. When it happened, I kept a detailed account of all of it, writing it out in a way that was therapeutic to me, who is a writer and a storyteller by nature and in my heart. The beautiful, peaceful life that we had spent 10 years cultivating and loving and growing in crumbled at our feet in the blink of an eye. And it left us reeling for many months, following not one, but 2 episodes. I lost my family due to this situation. We lost friends. We lost sight of who we were, and had no idea if we would ever find our way back to a life that was recognizable or fulfilling or safe. I wanted to retell our story from the point of view that it was happening in current time, up to the point where he was admitted. I've always known that my love and passion for connecting to people through storytelling, especially if it was from lived experience, was going to be a big part of my life someday. During the active episodes, I often thought to myself that it sounded more like a novel or a movie than it did real life. I did consider writing a book about our experience once everything had blown over and I was in a position where that would be possible. Every time I tried, again, I would feel the not yet. There's something bigger on the horizon. You have to wait. For months, I have been mulling over how to use the most traumatic and life-altering thing that we have ever lived through for something that would help other people. When you're dealing with someone who's having a mental health crisis, especially if it's for the very first time, while also listening to the biological instinct to run, 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 you're expected by society and by those around you to just know what to do. Nothing can prepare you for who you become when you watch the person that you love the most in this world get lost in a mental crisis. You find out pretty quickly that very little of society is welcoming to people with a psychiatric diagnosis. The response to he and I both in the middle of our crisis opened our eyes to just how little most people really understand these situations, and after losing so many people, we knew that we somehow wanted to do something to change that. This year has been a crash course in mental health. And the desire to somehow find a way to combat the societal response to individuals with mental illness has been growing inside of me since it began to happen to us. Until last week, I had an idea. What if I could use the detailed documentation of our experience, combined with my love of connecting to people through storytelling and performance art? I was a theater kid. To share our story in a way that would springboard us into being able to reach as many people as possible and spread awareness and education for what happens to your life when a mental crisis strikes. That's where the idea for this page began. I wanted to use my passion for this to create an immersive experience. one that would put you, the audience, into the shoes of somebody reacting to and deciding how you would respond to this situation if it was happening to you. I wanted to take you on a journey from initially responding to the first red flags and not knowing what to do when it escalates into a full-blown emergency, and ultimately the relief and the hope that waits on the other side of getting appropriate care and support. And a wake-up call surrounding how we as a society view and respond to the people who need our help and love and support the most. I hope you can forgive me for any emotional distress that you may have experienced while witnessing the retelling of our story and what it did in your body, mind, and spirit. And I hope desperately that you can feel my heart when I say that this is the springboard for the legacy that I want to leave, which is to leave this world kinder, more compassionate, more knowledgeable, more informed, and a more supportive place for families like ours and so many of yours. Reliving this story along with you through the emotions that bubbled up in me as I retold this story and reconnected to it in this way has been massive for the amount of healing that I've been able to do. Again, I hope so much that you can feel my heart and that you will stay and continue to be part of the vision that I have for changing the game for people like me and educating people through our story and the emotions that came with it, which I hope is going to shine a light on how we as a society and we as individuals need to be prepared at any time to rise to the occasion and support our loved ones in the case that they have a mental crisis in which they need our love and support, and the answer is almost never going to be to abandon them.
She tells us that this whole crisis had actually occurred in January and not in August in real time as she was portraying it to be. What we were seeing was never in real time, and her children were completely safe the entire time. This was just performance art. What? Hey, so this is insane. Do not do us theater kids like that. Like, we already have a bad rap. We don't need you on top of it. Like, guys, we do not claim her. Like, I was one of the many people who followed this story from, like, right after the very first video was posted. It came up on my For You page and I, like, saved it and I was like watching for updates and stuff. I remember how many people in her comments were concerned for her and her kids and her well-being, you know? Losing sleep for her, worried that she needed help. And the whole time, she was fine. She says she did not expect this to go viral. She ends the video by saying something about, we need to rise to the occasion and the answer is never going to be to abandon them, which pushes such a harmful ideology. Look at me right now. Look at me. If you're in this situation and you can get out, take your kids and go. Don't worry about abandoning someone and protect yourself. Support your loved ones through their mental health crises, sure, but protect your kids' safety first. Do not hide upstairs in a room alone while your husband, who is known to be a danger to himself and others, has access to and your children. So basically she did all of this to raise awareness for what it's like to be the loved one of someone experiencing a mental health crisis. There are 100 other ways she could have done this. She could have done the same thing but put like in the captions or in her bio that it was just like a retelling or like a skit or something so that people weren't actively worried for her. Even if she just sat down and did her makeup and told the story, people still would have watched it. It still would have gotten attention. She didn't have to create worry and panic over her children's safety and well-being just to raise awareness. Anyways, she did end up posting an apology.
The thing that I believe and will stand behind is that people get what they deserve, which is exactly what's happening to me right now. I'm not going to delete this account just yet because I think that I 100% deserve to have to sit with and hear every single person that feels wronged, betrayed, exploited, manipulated, and all of the very hurt, very valid comments that I'm getting. And I think it would be letting myself off too easy, even though this was completely my oversight and it was 100% my responsibility to be able to put myself in a position where I could see exactly what you guys are talking about and do it differently. I am so deeply and sincerely and genuinely sorry for the hurt that I caused by telling my story the way that I did. I am so incredibly disappointed in myself, y'all. I never ever set out with an intention to exploit or manipulate or hurt anyone. But that meant that I completely skipped over the fact that the way that I told this story could be really hurtful and triggering for so many of you who maybe would not have chose to engage with my content or story if there had been a disclaimer saying that this was a retelling and not happening in current time. My reasons for sharing it the way that I did felt so valid while I was doing it that way because I knew the direction that I was headed ultimately, but that meant that I was not able to see the harm that it could cause. And what I'm going to do today and for as long as I need to and feel like it's helpful and not harmful, I'm going to leave my account up and I want to do whatever I can to fix the issue immediately. I absolutely deserve to be sitting with this backlash so that I can take actual accountability every single time I read a message that says that you feel betrayed, hurt, and especially from one specific angle that I did not even know to consider and have had my eyes opened to since reading all of your very helpful comments. What I'm talking about specifically is that when somebody tells a story, even if it is true, from the point of view that it is happening in real time, no matter what the reason for that is and how good that I may have thought that that was, it makes it hard for the women who actually need help to be believed if they need to post and this is their only outlet for connection during a time when they are genuinely in harm's way. I did not know to think about this from this direction and am so glad that so many of you have commented this and made me aware of this. And I just want to say I am devastated that I did not consider that and will do whatever it takes to make it right.
And then she later deleted her entire account.
I'm not going to delete this account just yet.
Yeah, I yelled bomb on a plane even though there isn't a bomb on this particular plane because I'm trying to raise awareness for planes that do have bombs on them. Yeah, I called the fire department even though my house isn't on fire to raise awareness for houses that are on fire. Yeah, I called the police to report an intruder in my home even though there isn't an intruder in my home just to raise awareness for homes that do have intruders in them. That's how you sound right now. So some people are speculating whether or not this was even real, if she just lied or dramatized some parts of it, or if she just made up the entire thing. Naturally, I, as an honorary FBI agent, did a deep dive into this woman. She does have a husband and she does have 4 children. They do exist, so. She didn't make anything up in that respect, but some people are still speculating that she made up the mental health crisis part for attention, which I cannot concretely confirm or deny. There are a couple of details about the story that don't make sense, but it could have just been the way she told it. Something I found to be suspicious was in the second video when she says because of how quick the response was with so many people recognizing what was going on, how quickly I was able to recognize it because of that outreach, it changed the trajectory of things. Which is interesting because at the end of this she says it's a retelling. You didn't have the account before. You didn't learn about your husband's possible mania from users on TikTok. So you acting like our feedback helped you, saying that our comments changed the trajectory of things, wasn't a direct retelling. It is a lie. It's a lie. That's a lie. That's what a lie is. Another lie was that she didn't expect to go viral. At one point she said she planned to drag it on for months to gain some traction. Like, whether you were spreading awareness or not, your end goal was always to get attention. Like, don't act like it wasn't. That's why you kept asking for help and advice even though you didn't need it, because you were trying to get more engagement on your videos so more people would see them. Like, ma'am, you doing all that and then saying you didn't expect to go viral is kind of giving Gypsy Rose Blanchard taking a fertility pill, having unprotected sex, and then getting on camera and being like, yeah, it was like a surprise. We definitely weren't expecting it. Like, I don't think I'm pregnant. Like, it's not that. Maybe it did happen to them in January and they worked through it. Maybe she made the whole thing up for attention. Ultimately, again, just a stranger on the internet. Can't say for sure if it was fake or not. I don't know, I wasn't there. In the end, this situation fostered a lot of anger, specifically in the mental health community, because she's literally the boy who cried wolf. She was acting like something serious was going on when it wasn't. Now, the next time something like this happens to someone who might be in an actual crisis, people are just gonna see it and be like, oh, it's just another flightless bird situation. Scroll. People who might be having actual issues will be labeled as liars and disregarded because of her. But that's all I have for this video up until this point. Do I think Birdie will ever show her face on TikTok again? Can't be sure. Who knows? Probably not, because she is pretty disliked in the community now. I'm genuinely interested to know what you guys think about this and how you feel about it, so leave a comment and let me know. Just so you guys know, I do not support this specific woman's wrongs. That was a wrong. That was a wrong. That was a wrong. Sorry, that was my Donald Trump impression. Please stop. As usual, if you have something nice to say, leave a comment. If you have something not nice to say, leave a comment. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. I post every Tuesday and Thursday, and sometimes a secret third day. And don't get your meds from an app or a website on the internet. See a doctor. Okay, thanks, bye. Mania can be a symptom of bipolar disorder. Oh my god, not an aeroplane. Helicopter. Sound like a helicopter? Okay, that was annoying. Anyway, this statement, I just spit. I hope you saw it. The ghost is back. Anyway.